We thought we knew the story. We thought Blake Lively was reacting, that Justin Baldoni was the aggressor, that this was some Hollywood clash gone legal like the others. But what if we got it all backwards? What if Team Blake struck first? What if all the noise, all the statements, all the confusion was part of a plan to bury one man before he could speak? Because now we have evidence, not theories, not guesses. Actual receipts that tell a very different story, a story that begins not with Justin going public, but with Blake's team quietly moving behind the scenes, planting seeds, sending messages, contacting influencers, reaching out to platforms, framing a narrative and hoping no one would notice, and at first no one did because it was subtle, calculated, dressed in the usual PR language of concerns and misinformation. But behind that soft tone was something darker, because now an ex-staffer has come forward claiming that weeks before Justin ever made a single public comment about Blake, her team was already circulating briefing documents to brand reps and media, contacts painting him as unstable, manipulative, and quote emotionally dangerous. And once that document leaked, everything changed, because it wasn't about a reaction anymore, it was about a preemptive strike. And when creators started comparing timelines, the truth exploded. Justin's public post was on a Monday. The first outreach email from Blake's team was 2 Fridays earlier, and the email didn't just talk about reputational risks. It offered direct quotes, allegedly taken from private conversations, all of which Baldoni's team now claims are either distorted or entirely fabricated. And that's not all. A second whistleblower from a social analytics firm revealed they were asked to monitor Baldoni's online mentions weeks in advance, with a focus on downplaying positive engagement and pushing quiet narratives to shift the tone. And when asked who the client was, they confirmed it was a media management firm tied directly to the Lively family office. So now we're not talking about defense, we're talking about orchestration. A campaign launched with purpose and strategy, and most importantly with the goal of discrediting Baldoni before he even had a chance to speak. And here's where it gets explosive, because according to a leaked phone transcript from a now confirmed brand consultant, the phrase used to describe Baldoni's rising popularity was quote a threat to the image ecosystem. And that's not just personal, that's systemic. That means this wasn't about a feud, it was about control, about locking down the narrative before it could breathe. And suddenly the questions start pouring in. How long had this been planned? How many people were involved? How much of what we thought we knew was fed to us? And how deep does the smear really go? Because if this was first, then everything that followed wasn't a response, it was a cover. And if that's true, then the silence from Team Blake doesn't just look suspicious, it looks rehearsed. And now the internet is digging and connecting and exposing. And the one question that echoes louder than all the rest is, what did Blake know, and when did she know it? Because the truth may have just flipped the whole script. It started quiet, not a storm, not even a breeze, just a strange silence. The kind that doesn't feel calm but calculated, like something was being held back, like someone somewhere knew exactly what they were doing. And that's exactly what this was, because now we know Team Blake didn't just respond to Justin Baldoni, they prepared for him. They anticipated him, they moved first, and they did it quietly, surgically, behind the scenes, long before anyone was watching. Because weeks before Justin ever posted anything, before he uttered a single word publicly, there were emails being sent, meetings being booked, and influence being bought, not in cash, not in contracts, but in reputation, in the art of the whisper, the strategic leak, the well-timed DM. And it all begins with one leaked calendar entry from a PR assistant who was instructed to prep briefing language regarding a quote problematic figure rising in social metrics. And that figure we now know was Justin Baldoni. And what makes that chilling is the date, 2.5 weeks before the first known public conflict between them. And when that calendar screenshot leaked, creators and legal experts alike began piecing together a pattern, a timeline that painted a very different picture, one where Baldoni wasn't the attacker, but the target, a narrative crafted not in response, but in anticipation. And the more we dug, the darker it got, because then came the pitch deck, the one sent to a handful of lifestyle influencers, labeled confidential and loaded with buzzwords like emotional volatility and quote patterns of manipulation. And while it never named Baldoni directly, it included veiled references to a man known for faux vulnerability and weaponized empathy, words that matched the way Blake's team would later describe him in official filings, word for word. And when a creator finally posted the deck on X, it was over, because within minutes, others came forward saying they'd received it too, not once, but twice, once before Baldoni's statement and once after. And that confirmed what no one wanted to admit, that there was coordination, and it wasn't defensive, it was offensive. And Then came the email threads messages between a junior agent and the media. Contact discussing concerns about Justin's, quote, unpredictable temperament and the need to, quote, plant more balanced coverage before things escalate, and that was the phrase. That broke it all open before things escalate, because that means they knew something was coming. They knew Justin might speak, and they were planning to blunt the blow before it hit. And here's where it turns even more calculated, because a well-known tech strategist who once worked with a firm tied to Blake's brand initiatives revealed they had been contracted to monitor Baldoni's engagement spikes and create alternate keyword maps that would shift SEO focus away from his advocacy and toward unrelated controversies. And when asked directly if Blake's team was involved, they didn't deny it. They just said, quote, "We were hired to protect a premium brand, nothing more." And suddenly the story shattered into something no one was ready for, because now every article, every thread, every platform takedown that seemed neutral or random might have been the result of months of invisible maneuvering of pressure, applied not in the spotlight but in the shadows. And that's when a creator uncovered a flagged email that referenced Baldoni's growing platform as, quote, "a strategic obstacle and narrative realignment," and those 5 words, strategic obstacle and narrative realignment, have since become the rallying cry of every creator now questioning everything they were told, everything they repeated, because if Team Blake moved first, then the story we thought we were watching was a lie, a carefully managed illusion, a branding war dressed up as personal fallout. And as the documents pile up, as the whistleblowers start stepping forward, as creators build timelines and fans dig deeper, the silence from Team Blake isn't protecting them, it's condemning them, because if you had nothing to hide, why move before the storm? And the question now isn't just what did Blake know, the question is, how far was she willing to go to protect the image, and how many people got hurt before anyone dared to speak? At first it looked like a coincidence, just another messy Hollywood moment. One creator posts a vague thread, another follows up with a screenshot, a third leaks a PDF file from some anonymous inbox, and suddenly everything we thought we knew about the Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni feud starts to shake, because what was once labeled as retaliation is now looking more like preparation. What we thought was Blake reacting to Justin's public comments might have actually been a preemptive strike to silence a story before it could spread. And now the evidence is multiplying, because timeline after timeline proves that Blake's team was already in motion long before Justin broke his silence, and they weren't just monitoring him, they were quietly launching a whisper campaign, crafted not to confront him directly, but to poison the well of trust before he even arrived. And one of the first cracks appeared when a legal YouTuber discovered metadata on a supposedly leaked internal memo that referenced, quote, "an influencer control matrix tied to emotional advocacy," and that document was drafted 10 days before Justin's viral post. And once that detail went public, the back channels started to roar. Suddenly, PR experts, former interns, ex-assistants began to anonymously drop hints in comment sections, subreddits, encrypted DMs, and what they described wasn't a reaction, it was a roadmap, a plan involving internal keyword memos, shadow brand trackers, backdoor press advisories, and the deliberate seeding of emotional narratives across creator networks. And the goal was simple: paint Justin as unstable early on so that anything he said later could be reframed as bitterness or exaggeration. And here's where it gets ugly, because one anonymous source from a former PR firm stated outright that they had been offered bonuses for ensuring creators flagged Justin's clips as, quote, tone deceptive or audience manipulative terms, specifically designed to erode trust while maintaining a veneer of neutrality and dictatoriality. And when asked who paid for that contract, they wouldn't say, but they did confirm it came through a pass-through entity with financial ties to a production company long rumored to be linked to Team Lively. And it didn't stop there. A viral compilation from a drama analyst revealed that within 48 hours of Justin's post, over 20 micro-influencers with under 15K followers posted eerily similar captions, dismissing him as performative, vague, but consistent enough to draw suspicion. And when cross-referenced, their brand affiliations tied back to the same agency that managed 2 of Blake's past fashion campaigns. And suddenly creators began asking the question we all ignored for too long: who paid for the silence, who funded the smear? Because now we know it wasn't just a chaotic response, it was an industry maneuver. And perhaps the most chilling detail of all is the phrase found repeated in internal select screenshots from a media agency hired to manage the situation, quote, "If he speaks, we'll already have framed the room." And that's not PR, that's control manipulation, not of a message but of an entire Community and ecosystem of viewers, fans, and creators fed a version of reality that served a brand, not the truth, and now creators, who once defended Blake, are going quiet there. Posts disappearing, their statements archived or locked, and the silence is speaking louder than any tweet ever could, because now, they know the truth might catch them too, and suddenly the entire feud feels staged, not in its emotion but in its execution. Not a fight that escalated, but one that was choreographed from the beginning, with receipts planted, whispers seeded, and credibility stolen before a single word was ever spoken by Justin Baldoni. And if that's true, then what else did they fake? What else is orchestrated, and how deep does this go? They say receipts don't lie, but sometimes they whisper, and this time those whispers are becoming screams, because now creators aren't just questioning the timeline, they're questioning everything, every email, every interaction, every headline that once seemed random but now fits a pattern, and that pattern is undeniable. Blake's team didn't just want to get ahead of Justin, they wanted to erase him before he even entered the room, and the latest discovery proves that a shell media initiative was quietly launched under a different name weeks before Justin made his first public move. And what makes that terrifying is the directive buried in its launch file. Quote, the brand must remain untouchable regardless of male advocacy backlash. And when that surfaced, a known whistleblower confirmed it was greenlit by a crisis strategy firm whose biggest client at the time was none other than the lifestyle brand directly tied to Blake and Ryan. And here's where the web thickens, because a pattern of creator content began to emerge, posts that seemed personal, unrelated, but echoed the same words, same doubts, same subtle critiques of Baldoni's intentions, and every time a creator asked who started the doubt, there was never an answer, until a screenshot from a mutuals-only Discord leaked, and in it a message read, quote, "We got the narrative approved from the team at Ivory Vine, now we seed it slow in that name." Ivory Vine matters because Ivory Vine is one of 3 known boutique narrative firms, used specifically to control perception through micro-influencer orchestration, and if that sounds technical, that's because this wasn't gossip, this was engineered content, and what followed were 3 months of coordinated creator statements tagged with vague empathy-themed hashtags, designed to distract from Justin's message and reframe him as opportunistic. And when you zoom out, the chessboard becomes visible, because each time Baldoni tried to speak, a wave of soft cancel content arrived before him, emotional fatigue, pieces, callouts for overexposure, and strategic cries for, quote, balance and advocacy, all of which served one goal: to silence him without appearing to silence him. And when confronted, some of the creators behind those pieces admitted off record they'd been encouraged by reps to cover other stories instead, that they were told Justin's story was already oversaturated, and that they should let it, quote, die quietly. And here's the kicker, one of those creators later discovered that their own brand deal had been threatened behind the scenes unless they pulled their scheduled interview with Baldoni. And who made the threat? A firm representing a celebrity whose name was blacked out in the email chain, but whose initials matched someone very close to Team Blake. And suddenly the illusion shattered. The authenticity we trusted wasn't real, it was bot, curated, sanitized, and wrapped in carefully timed algorithms to bury the truth before it could be seen. And the creators who unknowingly played along are now scrambling, some issuing statements, some going dark, and others just pretending they never got involved. But it's too late, because the timeline's been built. The receipts are real, and the silence is damning, and what started as a quiet feud is now a full-blown exposure of Hollywood's dirtiest playbook, the strategy not just to fight back, but to erase dissent before it even starts. And now that we see it, now that we know how deep it runs, the question changes. It's not just why they did it, it's how many others have they done it to, and who's next. The deeper we dig, the darker it gets, because now internal whistleblowers aren't just hinting, they're confirming. Creators weren't just subtly influenced, they were strategically guided. And this wasn't a rogue fan campaign or a few overzealous PR interns, this was a funded initiative, and the money trail is starting to surface. Documents labeled discretionary allocations from a branded content fund share repeated line items listed only as narrative continuity coordination, and those entries matched the exact leak's key. Anti-Baldoni content was dropped, and one creator now admits they were offered 5 figures to quietly pivot their story focus with one condition: no direct mention of Baldoni, no trace of the pivot, just a soft redirection away from male advocacy discourse. And when they declined, their partnership was abruptly ended, and their upcoming brand deal mysteriously fell through. And guess who handled that deal? A firm recently acquired by a media venture co-chaired by a longtime ally of Team Lively. And that's not a coincidence, that's a chokehold, and the emails are even worse. In one, Week, a brand strategist writes to a creator manager stating, quote, "We've already sent the prompt list, just make sure they follow the sequence in that sequence." Outlined 5 themes: Baldoni, arrogance, fatigue, overrepresentation, brand fatigue, and need for nuance. These weren't opinions, they were directives sent on a pipeline and packaged as creator content, and to make it seem organic, the PR team even used a process called staggered emergence, instructing creators to post similar themes days apart with different formats to avoid suspicion. But the data doesn't lie. In a digital forensics group now shows over a dozen videos with staggered release windows that mirror the playbook, and when analyzed they reveal synchronized phrasing, subtle framing shifts, and even echo words pulled directly from internal memos used by a crisis team previously linked to other celebrity narrative battles. And here's where it gets disturbing: that same team was once sued for manipulating mental health narratives online to suppress a separate scandal, and now they're allegedly advising Team Blake. And suddenly, this entire story becomes about more than just Justin, because if they can do this to him, to a respected creator known for empathy and vulnerability, what could they do to someone without his following, his platform, or his access? And that's when creators started to panic. One posted a cryptic tweet, then deleted everything. Another said they, quote, "didn't know the full story and regret participating," and a third revealed they were told Baldoni was unstable and shouldn't be platformed, and that misinformation came from someone claiming to be in mental health PR, but who was later found to be affiliated with the same strategy agency hired by Blake's broader branding apparatus. And the pattern continues, because even creators who now try to walk it back are being warned, silently reminded through vague emails that NDA terms still apply. And that's not guilt, that's fear that they helped bury a message that was never about ego or clout, but about calling out the powerful when they cross a line. And now that line is smeared with fingerprints from dozens of handlers, agencies, and assistants, all trying to stay out of frame, while the reputation of a man who dared speak up was torn apart before he even opened his mouth. And if that's what happened behind the curtain, what's still hiding in the shadows? How far did they go? How much did they pay? And most importantly, who knew and let it happen? Because this isn't just a smear, it's a machine, and now that machine is finally breaking down. So now we're here, the end, or maybe the beginning, because what started as whispers has erupted into something no one can ignore anymore. The walls of silence have cracked, and through them we can finally see what was always hiding just out of frame. Not a feud, not a misunderstanding, but a calculated campaign built in boardrooms, disguised as creator content, dressed in empathy, but dripping with manipulation. And what's more terrifying is how close they came to getting away with it, how easily they turned honesty into controversy and kindness into clout chasing, because Justin Baldoni wasn't trying to win, he was trying to speak. And for that they tried to erase him slowly, softly, quietly, through narrative control and creator suppression. And when that didn't work, they turned up the volume, not through public statements, but through private silence, where brand deals became weapons and influence was twisted into intimidation, because this wasn't just a bad strategy, it was a weaponized ecosystem. And now that weapon has backfired, because people are talking, not just fans, not just observers, but insiders, people who are part of the machine and can no longer stomach what they helped create. And that's the real shift here, not that a celebrity got caught playing dirty, but that the system built to protect them failed to anticipate what would happen when creators finally connected the dots and stood up for each other. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just about Blake or Justin or some hidden smear campaign, it's about truth and the price some are willing to pay to bury it. And the terrifying efficiency with which that burial was planned. This whole ordeal has opened a door we may never be able to close again, because now we know the tricks, the tactics, the playbook, and maybe that's exactly what they feared the most, not just the exposure of one plot, but the unraveling of an entire architecture of control. And the creators who once feared speaking out are no longer afraid, because the moment passed, the narrative cracked, and the voices they tried to drown out are now echoing louder than ever. So what happens next? Maybe nothing. Maybe Blake's team denies everything. Maybe more documents leak. Maybe lawsuits come. Maybe apologies surface. Maybe they double down. Maybe they stay silent. But what can't be undone is the truth. The receipts, the timing, the silence that screams louder than any post or press release. And if you're watching this, if you've made it this far, you already know what matters. This wasn't a coincidence. It was a campaign, and now the truth has outlived the narrative. And the damage they tried to inflict has only revealed their fear of accountability, because when creators unite, when timelines sync, when facts survive suppression, the truth wins. And right now the truth Is this they tried to smear the wrong man, they tried to bury the wrong story, and now the question isn't if people believe Justin Baldoni, the question is how many more? Stories like his were silenced before we learned to look closer, to question louder, to see the fingerprints hidden in every frame and ask who's really behind the curtain pulling the strings.